Welcome to Common Sense. Here, we dive deep into history, culture, and society, bringing you detailed analyses of key events, influential figures, and complex systems that shape our world today. Whether it's exploring the life and work of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar or understanding the deeper mechanisms of social structures, our mission is to enlighten, educate, and inspire. Subscribe and join us on this journey of discovery and transformation. Summary of Dr. Ambedkar's evidence before the Southborough Committee. Here is a 20-point summary of Dr. Ambedkar's evidence before the Southborough Committee, which was appointed to devise the franchise and electoral system for India under the Government of India Act of 1919. Dr. Ambedkar's main arguments. Inadequate representation. Dr. Ambedkar argued that the Southborough Committee's proposed representation for the depressed classes was inadequate and did not reflect their significant population. He emphasized that true popular government required not only representation of opinions but also personal representation. Social tyranny and separate electorates. He highlighted the social tyranny faced by the depressed classes and asserted the need for separate electorates to ensure their voices were heard in the council hall. He argued that shared secular interests were insufficient to protect the depressed classes from discrimination. Impact of caste system on voting. Dr. Ambedkar explained how the caste system, with its inherent hierarchy and prejudices, would influence voting patterns. He noted that this would disadvantage the depressed classes, even in mixed electorates with reserved seats. Specific recommendations for constituencies. He provided detailed recommendations for constituencies, suggesting grouping districts on a linguistic basis to minimize the need for communal representation while ensuring adequate representation for different communities, including the depressed classes. Criticism of existing representation. He criticized the existing representation in the Bombay Legislative Council, particularly the overrepresentation of Brahmins and the lack of representation for Marathas despite their larger population. Population as basis for representation. Dr. Ambedkar advocated for population as the primary basis for determining representation, arguing that the state's jurisdiction extended to all its subjects, not just taxpayers or voters. Need for direct participation in government. He emphasized that suffrage's significance lay in enabling active participation in shaping the terms of associated life. Criticism of government inaction. Dr. Ambedkar criticized the government's inaction in addressing the issue of representation for the depressed classes. He pointed out that even when the Government of India recognized the inadequacy of the Southborough Committee's recommendations, no significant action was taken. Key points from the Southborough Committee's perspective. Definition of untouchable. The committee found the definition of an untouchable as someone who caused pollution by touch to be sufficient for electoral purposes. Recognition of untouchables as a distinct group. The committee acknowledged that the untouchables constituted a distinct group requiring separate representation. Dr. Ambedkar's criticism of the Southborough Committee. Lack of consideration for untouchables. Dr. Ambedkar criticized the Southborough Committee for failing to adequately consider the needs and concerns of the depressed classes. He argued that the committee's report barely mentioned the depressed classes and did not engage with their social conditions or capacity for self-governance. Grossly wrong population figures. He accused the committee of relying on grossly inaccurate population figures for the depressed classes, which led to their further marginalization in the proposed electoral system. Arbitrary and unjust allocation of seats. He criticized the committee's method of allocating seats as arbitrary and unjust, arguing that it favored certain communities at the expense of others. Ignoring the importance of personal representation, he argued that the committee, by focusing primarily on the representation of opinions, failed to grasp the crucial importance of personal representation for marginalized communities like the depressed classes. Favoring territorial constituencies. He criticized the committee's preference for territorial constituencies, arguing that while they might address the representation of interests, they would fail to ensure adequate personal representation for the depressed classes. Lack of understanding of caste dynamics. Dr. Ambedkar argued that the Southborough Committee demonstrated a lack of understanding of the complex dynamics of the caste system and its impact on social and political life in India. Outcomes and aftermath. Limited increase in seats. Despite the Southborough Committee's recommendations, the Government of India, recognizing the inadequacy of representation for the depressed classes, doubled the allotted seats to 14. Continued advocacy for depressed classes. the issue of representation for the depressed classes continued to be a point of contention, with subsequent committees, such as the Ambedkar Committee in 1923, also recommending increased representation. It's important to note that while the Southborough Committee recognized the need for increased representation for the depressed classes, it was Dr. Ambedkar's persistent advocacy and detailed arguments that played a significant role in bringing about even those limited changes. His testimony before the committee provides valuable insights into the challenges of building a truly representative democracy in a society grappling with deep-seated social hierarchies and inequalities. Thanks for watching. If you found this content insightful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button for more in-depth explorations into history, society, and culture. Stay tuned for our next episode, and until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better tomorrow. See you next time.